All right, so the name of my talk, I know you've seen, lots of graphs, et cetera, and as Almuth just said, I have sort of crossed over. You'll see today I have my title as executive coach and management professor. I'm out there in the gig economy now. I was a management faculty member at Boston College in the US for 6 years. Then I moved over to France with my family, one of whom is actually in the room right now, but I won't point her out. And was on the faculty at a French business school for 6 years, and then decided that since I have been going around researching, lecturing on, coaching people on how to craft their careers, I darn well ought to be able to do it myself. So I've been out in the gig economy for a couple of years, and it's interesting because when you are a gig economy person, you don't have the same job title that you've always had. When you arrive at border control at a UK airport and you have to tell them what your occupation is, and you can just say management professor, everybody knows what that is. What I do every single time I come to the UK, well, I've settled now, but for a year or so, every time I came in, I would experiment with a different title and just see sort of how it landed. Like, how did it feel to me? What kind of questions did it stimulate in the border control officer? Because I'm one of those people, if you go to my LinkedIn page, I'm like a career coach / executive coach / management professor / trainer / facilitator / HBR contributor. That's an awful lot, especially when you think about what is my work identity? And how am I seen in a larger occupational community? So this is who I am today. I'm an executive coach and management professor, but I'm working independently, doing a lot of work with the United Nations. Was here last week doing some executive education at London Business School. Here today, and it's great to see people I know from the work family research community here as well. And I will be followed by I will be followed, I believe, first by they're trucking in and setting up a bunch of wine outside. So we have that to look forward to. And we'll be having cocktails before the Rogers lecture. Okay, and then we'll have Ellen Kosick, who is a true legend in the field of work-family research, so you have that to look forward to. Okay, so this question of balance and of sustainability, work-life balance, it turns out, is actually, if you're not in the research field, is actually a fairly controversial term. There are some people who very strongly, do not endorse that term because they feel that it connotes this idea that, oh, you're half invested in work and half in life or what have you. For me, I don't have any negative associations with the idea of balance. I think when people talk about being balanced, when I talk with coaching clients or leaders or what have you, there's a sense of being able to invest the time and the energy into the things in your life and in your career that are most important to you. And that's really what I mean. I think perhaps a better term is work-life fit. That are you able to fit together all of the most important aspects of your life? Are you able to perform as well in each of those domains as you would like to? And do you receive some fulfillment and some, a sense of gratification from the different activities in which you invest yourself? So I really think about work life as being a question of investment of energetic resources and of how you nurture and cultivate those resources. So the question is the balance that you currently have, if you just think about where you are today in terms of where you're putting your time, where you're putting your energy, how life feels generally, your sense of control and your sense of being centered and sense of overall satisfaction. How close are you to being where you would like to be? So a couple of questions. How many of you guys have plenty of time to get done everything in your life that you want to get done? Okay, we have a guru here in the purple sweater, so please approach him later for guru-type questions. Yeah, that was excellent. I was going to say. Okay. So that's one out of the room. Let's see. How many of you feel like the demands that you face at work are gradually becoming ever less and more manageable? Oh, okay, so we do have a few people in that condition. That's good, that's good. But generally, what I normally hear is, there's this kind of acceleration, this ongoing creep in terms of demands that we face. Part of that's brought on by, globalization. Part of that is brought on by this ethos of more with less, let's get more efficient and leaner. And part of it is brought on by the technological advances that we all live with, these devilish, seductive electronic devices that we all go around attached to, myself included. I no longer, perhaps like some of you, have an actual physical clock in the bedroom. My smartphone is my clock, and it's actually under my pillow, so if I wake up in the night and the dog wants to go out, I'm curious what time it is, and then I'm curious, like, who's on Facebook, and so it's both it is a tool of liberation and also a slave master at the same time. So there's all kinds of factors that affect the type of balance that we experience in our lives. And we're at a point where we may have a higher level of need to really be quite conscious and intentional in the way that we invest our time and energy, and in the way that we react to the conditions we face in order to achieve the kind of balance, the kind of centeredness that we'd like to have. This photo dates back from Depression era New York, when people were doing all sorts of stunts to try and gain a little bit of money, whether it was the dance marathons, etc. But aside from the fact that it's not a color photo and the gentleman is dressed a bit more formally than today's high wire headstand person would be doing, I think it's still a pretty effective metaphor. Okay, so let's talk about energy. So when you are thriving is an energetic state in which you really feel full of vitality. You're learning and growing. It's like that Plato's notion of the eudaimonic well-being, where you really have a sense of something important and meaningful and you're invested in it. So the energetic qualities of thriving, if you're thriving, you're really feeling engaged in the work that you're doing, engaged in your activities, and engaged in your relationships, so that you're investing in them, you're giving attention to them, and you're getting something back from them. There's an energy exchange and a renewal process that goes on in a state of thriving. Thriving also connotes a lot of positivity. Not that you don't experience negative affect or frustration or difficult challenges, etc. Of course you do. But in a state of thriving, you're really directing your attention towards the positive. You're seeing a lot of positive. You're noting, celebrating the positive things, and all of that positive affect is coming back and renewing you and increasing your energy. And thriving is also infused with a state of, a feeling of competency, of capability. So in a state of thriving, you really do feel able, and that you have the capacity to take on the challenges that you face, and that you have some resources and some tools to apply to them, that you're able to actually function effectively and do well and enjoy what you're doing. At the other end of this energetic spectrum, we have the state of burnout. And energetically, there are those three qualities are at the other end of a spectrum. So instead of being engaged, you're exhausted. It's a state of having a complete drain of energy. Now, interestingly, burnout is the burnout scales that we have, those are research-based. Burnout is not necessarily a clinical condition. But on a continuum, you can be relatively more or less engaged or exhausted. Oftentimes, that exhaustion shows up emotionally. Burnout research, of course, for those of you who know that literature, was first examined among human service workers. And it continues to be a really serious problem among medical doctors, actually. Today, I've worked with lots of people who made the commitment to go through the rigorous training because of the fact that they really wanted to help cure people, that they had a deep mission, sense of calling to work with people and to help cure disease, and arrive at a point in their careers where, due to the overwhelm that they've faced, they actually no longer even really see their patients as full human beings. So there's that total loss, that loss of emotional energy. And you can also be mentally exhausted. You can be physically exhausted when you're in this state of depletion. And instead of that positive attitude in a burnout state or approaching that, a stressed state, you tend to be, have much more of a sense of cynicism. So you can see it sometimes when you go into organizations, whether it is, you know, a private company or, you know, sometimes a school, or God help you, as an immigrant in France, where I've lived since 2009, I've had to do many, many different bureaucratic procedures to get my national, you know, I don't have citizenship, but I have a long-term resident card, et cetera, which was not an easy thing to obtain, and which required not only a massive amount of papers, but a fair degree of emotional fortitude and patience to go through that procedure. And I have to say, I did encounter an awful lot of cynical employees in that process. So oftentimes you'll see they tend to cluster in organizations where you see people who, you know, teachers, for example, for whom students are the problem that make their lives difficult rather than the reason why they're there. Or, you know, people who just kind of feel that they're at war. I was asking someone in an organization to describe, how would you characterize the culture of your organization in your own words? And he said, it's a knife fight. I was like, ow. And instead of feeling really capable on the low energy, you know, the burnout side, people tend to feel a sense of inefficacy, a sense of this is overwhelming, I can't do this. Maybe what used to be easy for me now seems impossible. And this is a really dehumanizing and demoralizing state to find oneself in. So long ago, when I was a PhD student, I did some research on burnout, and I've always enjoyed, you know, following the literature. It's been an interest of mine. It became a much, much higher level of interest of mine a few years ago when I experienced it myself. So this was the motivating factor that that launched me into this independent career, was I really did arrive at a state where I found that I had fundamentally a pretty profound values conflict with what I saw as the dominant values that my organization operated on, such that work that had once been rewarding and fascinating and intellectually challenging for me became a source of real exhaustion, and it was not at all rewarding, where I really felt, you know, had lost that sense of capability that had formerly been, you know, so much a part of my everyday experience. And I definitely had. I remember joining this organization, seeing certain, you know, people who were just kind of perpetually, you know, terribly, terribly negative, and thinking, if I ever reach that point, I gotta go. Like, I never, ever, ever want to be that. And there are those people out there, right? We have people in our lives who kind of drain us of joy, who are seem to be just negatively, have a negative charge on them, as though they're that negative pole on a magnet. And I think of my dear dear, difficult, departed grandmother, who you know, was, you know, kind of grew up in a family that had a lot of stressors and tended to be pretty negative. And as she got quite elderly and lost her hearing, I remember going to visit her in her rest home, and I would say things like, "Oh, you know, it's nice to see you. What a nice day it is outside." And she couldn't hear, so she'd just go, "I know, it's terrible, terrible." Like, I don't know what you said, but clearly it must be negative, because that's the only thing I can relate to. So, okay, so that's the burnout side. This is, we want to avoid this, right? And if anyone in this room is feeling this way, like, ooh, yeah, like, I feel exhausted all the time, or I really hate everybody I work with, I really don't care about my job. A little bit of a, you know, sign to kind of check up, step back, see how you're doing, take a little time to renew, etc. Start to say no more often, and see, can you bring yourself back up? Maybe work with a coach, because it is a kind of a demoralizing state to be in. So let's not go there. So let's talk about energy, which is really the capacity to perform. Time is one of our resources that is finite. We do not yet have the technology to actually expand our time, although really dedicated mindfulness practitioners do report that they have a sense of greater time abundance, in that they're able to really be entirely focused and present on whatever it is they're doing, and not have that kind of running, I'm late on this, or need to do that, or shouldn't have done that. But in general, I'm not a kind of Einsteinian physicist or anything, but apparently it's basically a fixed resource. Our other forms of energy, however, though, are more flexible. Okay, so energy, we have various energetic resources that we can conserve, we can build them up, we can expand them, we can renew them, and they can also be drained. Okay, so like that coworker or that difficult family member who, interacting with them ends up making you feel like, oh, I either need a drink or a nap or, to walk outside for a while. That's an example of energy drain. So we need to be aware of, like, my general principle that I recommend to everybody, this is a really good principle to live with, it's made a huge impact in my life, is to really pay attention to what energizes you and what drains you. And to the extent that you possibly can, invest yourself more in those energizing activities, relationships, situations, so that you're filling the tank and expanding the resources. And to the extent that you can, pull back from, de-invest yourself from the tasks, the relationships, the situations that you really find draining. And if you can make little micro changes on a day-to-day basis that help to tip the needle more towards the energetic side, that will have a significant impact on your overall well-being and functioning and happiness. So every time you get on a commercial flight, somebody demonstrates the use of this particular item, which is the oxygen mask that resides in a compartment above the seat that you sit in. And what is the instruction that is always given at this moment? Yes! It is to put your own mask on before assisting other passengers. Very important in a flight emergency situation. Very important in life generally. Okay, so to all of the super people out in the audience, the martyrs, the I don't need to sleep people, put your oxygen mask on before proceeding. This is really, really good advice just for life. So I've developed a tool that's out there in the audience, an energy audit. Normally that dashboard, which looks like this, I also have one that has a physical dial, just because I've learned over trial and error that I just don't have enough time in the current time allotted for this particular talk. And we started late, and there's wine outside. I don't want to go and hold you here for too long. So we're not going to do the physical, but that's a really important part. Okay, so today we're going to look at these three forms of energy: your mental energy, or your focus, your emotional energy, and your sense of purpose. So to the extent that you are doing a better job of really filling your tank in each of these, bringing all these dials up, keeping them up, knowing when they're getting low and knowing what to do to move them up, you're going to be thriving to a greater extent. Okay, and so this is a thing. I also do this for teams. I have a different assessment that builds on this that I do with teams to help teams understand how are we doing as a group collectively at managing our focus, at managing our emotional energy and our sense of purpose. But today the focus is on you and what you can do to check in, see how you're doing, and some questions for kind of some self-coaching, how you can move the needle up on those. So let's take a look at each of these three. Starting off with this button, mental energy or focus. And here, the questions around this on your, I'm not gonna, you have this already, so you can look at this as much as you want. Here the questions are around the extent to which you are able to really be intentional and direct your mental investment towards activities that are most important and valuable and high impact. And this is one of our core challenges, of course, that we all face, that many of us live in, our organizational lives feel like hamster cages with so many of those spinning wheels that we're in, or we may work for a company that operates in a state of continual crisis management. And we know that we have really important activities that if we could just get the amount of time, it's like when you're a faculty member, it's like you got to write, You got to get that writing, but there's, 400 emails and a line of students waiting to see you and a program committee meeting and, I said I was going to, join this group and contribute my thoughts, etc. So we really need, essentially, you're never going to have enough time. Even the retired person, I bet you have some projects that you'd like to get to that you haven't done yet. Or maybe you're a super mindful guru and you've learned how to just be like totally zen. So we can figure this out later. But really this is around being intentional and being strategic in how you use your time and energy. So one of the things I recommend here is that you really do, many of you probably have, how many of you are like to-do list people, big into to-do lists? How many people love those, check those things off? Okay, so one of the things that I have done in the past, and perhaps some of you do as well, is I have these to-do list items on my calendar, and every day I move, like I check off one and I move 14 to the next day. Like, once I had a little strategy where I just put them all in a Word document on my desktop. Big long to-do list of all the great things, saved it, closed it. I never opened it again. That's one way. It doesn't really solve them, but it kind of gets them out of your head. I think it's really valuable to take, at the beginning of the day, come to work already having determined what are like the 3 key things that if I get these done today, I'm really going to have a sense of progress. I'm going to be pleased, okay? Because you have a question of capacity. We have a finite amount of capacity. You cannot simply say, yes, I'll take that, yes, I'll take that, yes, I'll take that. Because it's like, you're like a vessel. Imagine you're going on a trip and you just have a small carry-on suitcase. And you're thinking, oh, that would be good. Oh, look at that scarf and that here. I'm going to put that in. I'm going to take that little tea kettle along in case I don't have one, and this thing, and the umbrella too. And then also I'm going to have this extra bag in case I go shopping, da-da-da. It's all stuff in. It's easy and quick. And then you like have to zip it closed. You go, I haven't got any trousers. And I didn't put any shoes. So good luck with that. That's probably not the most effective analogy. I think I won't use that again. But anyway, if you're already at capacity and you're saying yes to something else, the thing to be aware of is you are implicitly saying no to something. If you don't set your own priorities and use them to direct your activity, somebody else is going to set them for you. So who do you want setting your priorities? Whatever you say yes to, you're saying no to something else. You can either say no consciously, or you can say a silent no, and that silent no might be, no, I'm not going to get enough sleep tonight. No, I'm not going to do the quality of work that's going to make me feel good. No, I'm not going to have that lunch I was really hoping to have with my friend who I haven't seen in too long. No, I'm not going to go out for a walk. So really this is at its core about truly being intentional and choosing consciously how to invest your energy instead of getting caught up in that automaticity. Some things are seductive even though they are not valuable. So, we actually get neuroscientific research, which I don't do at all, but I read about as much as I can, indicates that we actually get a tiny little hit of dopamine when we get like a little notification, like, oh, another email has come, like somebody wants to talk to me or whatever. Like it's not that exciting, right? But yet there's something about those notifications that kind of like, oop, like I am going to, personality test. My phone, how many notifications on the screen? 0. Can't take those little red numbers. My husband, his email thing, it says like 29,300 unread emails. I'm like, how can you live like that? But you know what? We all have a different thing. So what did I do? I turned off the notifications. It's just the easier way than to be chasing after them. So have your list of like, what are the 3 things, not the 14, but the 2, the 1 or 2 or 3 really important, valuable things for me to do today, that if I do those, I'll feel a sense of progress. I will be moving towards the things that are most important to me. And then I'll fit the other stuff in around. Because there's some stuff that, like expense reports and email responses, you know what? You don't have to do it perfectly. In fact, nobody ever got a prize for being like the best emailer. But if you're the person who has really deep strategic thinking, that actually is something that's pretty valuable. So kind of the key things here are around understanding where you are in terms of your capacity and understanding what you're saying yes to and what you're saying no to, and make sure that those things actually matter to you. And then to step it up another level, think that way with your team. Okay, because managers who can really help their teams to manage their collective capacity are worth their weight in gold. There's a lot more to that. This is kind of beyond the scope of the current talk, but that is very important. And to really be intentional about where you're doing. So there's lots of little hacks, of course. You don't leave your email on all the time, because you're going to spend all your time on it. But you know what it's like when you have an all-day meeting or whatever, and you don't have internet access, and then you go and at 5 o'clock you sit down and you do your email, and you can actually knock it all off out of the way in 45 minutes, and then it's like, how come normally it takes me 6 hours, but yet I actually can do it in 45? Ding! Maybe that suggests that I should make a change in the way I manage email. So learn. Okay, let's move on because of the time. All right, so there you have your questions. Okay, wait, let me first say this. Every time I do a talk, it's like I like to do a different talk every time, but I put this slide in every single talk I give. This is the most important slide. So for those of you who are falling asleep, this is the very moment to pay attention, because the very most important thing for you to remember is that the single most motivating condition that you can be in is to have the sense of making progress at work that is personally meaningful. I draw this finding from the research of Teresa Amabile at Harvard, who with her husband, Steve Kramer, wrote this fantastic book called The Progress Principle, one of my favorite business books. And this is so fundamental. If you remember this finding, this has huge implications for how you manage your own life and for how you manage your team if you are in a leadership role. So if you are leading people, this should be your prime objective. How do I facilitate progress for everybody who works for me on a constant basis? Tiny little wins, little steps forward. And how do I make sure that that progress is linked to something meaningful? And the same thing for yourself. Okay, and that is why the kind of knowing, understanding what's the one most important thing for me to do today. And then at the end of the day saying to yourself, how did I do on that one most important thing? And if you did something, say, yes, that was awesome. Because boom, you're filling your tank. You're moving that needle up. So this is a really, really key finding to keep in mind. Okay. And the thing about if you feel overwhelmed, I bet there's like about 40% of you who have uttered the phrase, I know exactly what I need to do to manage my time better, but I just can't make myself do it. I hear this so often, like, why can't I know all the findings, I know what I need to do, why can't I make myself do it? There's nothing wrong with you. Okay, this is not a question. If you're in a state of constant overwhelm, it does not mean that you are deficient as a person. That's really important to understand. What it means is that you have developed some bad thinking habits. So what we do, this is from Shauna Shapiro, who's a mindfulness researcher. The brain is quite plastic. And we're constantly laying down and deepening pathways and connections in our brain. So whatever we do repeatedly digs in a deeper path, for better or for worse. People who are always thriving and growing, they have developed habits that promote that, and to the point that they have become unconscious and automatic. The one thing that I do without fail that I have done for 30 years, and I feel so lucky for it, is that I'm big into physical exercise. I just love it. I need it like I need oxygen. I don't have to make myself work out. I live on the side of a mountain. I hike up it all the time because I love it. It just it's the foundation of my well-being. And it's a habit. So lucky for me, I have a million other things that I'm bad at, but on the exercise question, I'm great, and it's because it's a habit that requires no effort whatsoever. It's like breathing. So whatever it is that you do habitually, you're digging those grooves deeper and deeper and deeper. So if, for example, you are super negative and you tend to focus on like, oh, what's frustrating here? And like my grandmother, the everything is terrible person. Like the sun could be shining on her and a beautiful pot of flowers in front of her and she's going, it's terrible, the world is terrible. So, if you're thinking, if, for example, you have the habit of scurrying after all the little like memos and little emails and meeting invitations and read this thing and da-da-da-da-da, because you know why you think it's seductive. You think, I can do this quickly, I can take it off my list. I checked on my to-do list, I have some progress, I have a feeling of, okay, this is better. But these are not the important things that are actually going to give you a real feeling that I'm doing what I care about. So just be careful of that, because that's going down this cow path, or this, being caught in the groove. So the thing about being more conscious and intentional is stepping back and reflecting and saying, no, wait a minute. What is really meaningful? Who do I want to be in this situation? What's the behavior I want to engage here? Now, I'll proceed. Okay, according to that, I'm going to rise up out of the past. So what we practice becomes stronger, for better or for worse. Thus, the value and the vital importance of really being clear about what it is that we want to do. Having an understanding of how am I habitually, what are the thinking patterns, what are the behavioral patterns that I'm doing habitually, and how, in fact, do I want to shift them. Having that awareness at first gives us the opportunity to actually choose. So, I recommend experimenting. You're all social scientists. Live like one. Every single day, okay, everything that you do during the day, you are generating a ton of data about yourself. So collect it. Go, okay, today, let's see, tomorrow I would like to, tomorrow, me, for example, I have this proposal I need to write. Okay, here are some things I've learned about myself through experimentation. My best time is in the morning. If I leave anything that's kind of requires thinking until later in the day, it just is not going to happen. Sometimes I trick myself. I go, I don't really feel like doing that right now. Like I kind of need to do something important. I kind of have to be like in the right mood. I'm not feeling that way right now. I'll wait around. No, this is a trap. So I know that my sharpest time, the time when I'm most creative, the time when I'm going to generate ideas, the time when that work that's important is going to be easiest to do, it's in the morning. I've slept, I've had a cup of tea, I've done a little stretching, I'm ready to go. The only thing that's going to get in my way at that point is something I put in my own way, like, I'll just kill a few emails, or I'll just go see, go tweet a couple things, whatever. I'll go see what, asinine thing Donald Trump has tweeted now. Like, why? 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 Is that important compared to my proposal? No, it's not. It's like that will be there later. So, my experiment today is going to be tomorrow morning. I'm going to, here's what I want to try and do. I'm going to set some constraints. I have a proposal. I have an idea for how I want it to look. I'm going to set some constraints. I'm going to write that proposal in 3 hours or less. I'm going to set myself a deadline. It's got to be done by then, and then I'm going to review and see how it comes out. So I'll do that type of thing for myself, and then afterwards I'll say, okay, what worked, what didn't, what facilitating conditions were there, et cetera. How did I get in my own way? So I really encourage you to think about how can you experiment with your own processes of working and thinking. And not just experiment about them, but then you reflect and learn, and that increases that sense of progress. So not just having your 3 important things at the beginning of the day, but you can kind of at the end of the day be like, what happened today? And you don't have to be a massive journal writer. I have on my phone an app I recommend. It's called Day One. It's a great little journaling app. Great place to capture, what went really well today? What do I want to try differently? What am I grateful for? So all of these types of things, this is all data, and it's ways for you to increase that sense of meaningfulness, that sense of intention, that sense of progress. Lots of little tools you can use on your own. Lots of research about how reflection and reflective writing is really powerful, actually, for helping you to kind of overcome difficulties and move forward in a more positive sense. All right, let's move on to emotional energy. And this is really around the types of interpersonal relationships that you are creating and your emotional experience. Okay, so a lot of this is about having positive, high-quality connections. This screen right here, I have kind of recreated from really interesting, this is from an app actually. At Yale, there's a fantastic center of research on emotional intelligence. And they have developed an app, it's called the Mood Meter. It costs like $1.99 or like the equivalent in pounds. I have no connection with this. I have nothing to gain. By saying this, I went to a conference and I saw this presented and I was intrigued. I bought the app. I thought it was really cool. And I also love it because it provides this map of your emotional experience. So emotion can be arrayed on two dimensions. One, our x-axis here running from pleasant emotions over on this side to unpleasant emotions over there. And on the y-axis, the energetic level of the emotion ranging from low to high. Okay, so on this 2x2 here, you have like the really positive, highly energized things. Up here in this corner is the ecstasy and the exhilaration and so forth. Down here is the pit of despair. You know, over here you have the more kind of serene, calm stuff. Over, you know, the anger up there, the more sadness and so forth. So anyway, the key thing about having this all laid out is that it gives you kind of a map to work with. So what's really important with your emotional experience is that you learn to recognize what's happening so that when you become aware of an emotion, like the other day I was on a coaching call with my own coach actually, and I was aware that I was just feeling kind of like flat, which is sort of unusual for me because I tend to be like pretty high pitched. So I was a little, I would say, apathetic at the moment. And what is quite liberating actually is to be able to label your emotion and go, oh, I'm actually feeling frustrated. Or I'm feeling like, right now I feel like I should be feeling really positive, but actually I'm feeling a little disappointed. Or, you know, everybody else around here is looking pretty calm, but I'm feeling like really super jazzy for some reason. To just know, or I'm feeling lonely. You know, I'm feeling kind of bereft, or I'm feeling, you know, really angry. To be able to just put a label on it, once you become aware of some emotion inside yourself and go, oh, that's that. That's, you know, that's hopefulness, or that's contentment. Boom, okay, so now I can take that emotion, I can just kind of just set it aside and go, yeah, there it is. Okay, and now I can decide, what do I want to do? Because a lot of times, particularly at work, you see all kinds of behavior that, interestingly, people will post hoc say was very logical. Oh, the reason why I was yelling in that situation was because it was the logical response to, you know, the dishonesty that the other person said in the comment. It's like, no, actually it wasn't. It was actually an out of control emotional reaction, but get the app, you know, and maybe you won't have it again. So being able to, now I actually just realized I have my slides out of order, so I'm going to go quick, 1, 2. Here's a really key emotional management skill is to, don't look at that, wait, too fast. If you like fishing, catching and release. Okay, so you catch the emotion, you go, oh yes, like look, here's the fish, and it's resentment. Or, oh, here's the fish, and it's, you know, tranquility. Okay, now I'm going to let it go and move on. So it's kind of an interesting metaphor of catching and releasing the emotion. So again, just as with the mental energy, we're trying to be more conscious and more intentional in choosing our response rather than in getting triggered. You know, the old amygdala hijack trigger, which I have a good exercise for, but there's not enough time. Okay, so let's just go back and talk a little bit about high quality connections. So one of the key things that contributes to having a lot of emotional energy at work is nurturing high quality connections. This is the body of research that's been led by Jane Dutton at the University of Michigan and these great research collaborators that she works with, and they've identified that the core characteristics of high quality connections are having mutual positive regard for the person that you are interacting with, having trust, and engaging respectfully. So bringing these qualities to any interaction that you have, whether it is with a shop clerk or your boss or your romantic partner, or your most despised colleague, or that really underperforming subordinate, or your 8-year-old child who won't go to bed, will reduce the amount of drain and increase the amount of emotional energy. And again, there's a little great exercise, which I won't go into because of the time, but to really be looking for what is positive here. I had a few years ago a really difficult work relationship with a person who was part of the burnout thing, but anyway, I've moved on. But I remember, this was an individual, perhaps you've had this experience of having kind of a work relationship where I would be waking up in the middle of the night finding myself like really getting angry, or I'd be out on a walk in nature and then I'd start some internal dialogue, and pretty soon like my lips would be moving. I don't think I was saying it out loud because nobody noticed that I was aware of, but I'd be like, all of a sudden I'd be in this like angry thing. And one of the things that I had to do is to say, what is actually positive? Look at this person as a whole person. So this person that I'm having this conflict with is actually somebody who was a baby once. This is a person who, has people in her life who love and appreciate her. This is a person who, has her own struggles, has been embarrassed before, is proud of things. And to kind of step back and look, positively, what is the whole picture of the individual there, gives you so much more to work with in terms of interpersonal relationships, because we are whole people. But the roles that we inhabit in our society and our work lives tend to make us see each other as much less than we fully are. So the mutual positive regard is a really good thing. So you think about what are the, what's the quality of the connections you have with your coworkers. The sense of gratitude that you feel. We know there's been a ton of research on how powerful it is to cultivate gratitude, that it really is a hugely boosting. You can do this in terms of your own, just kind of noting at night, what am I grateful for today? I had a little hack I did myself. One of my former passwords I used a lot before I got like a fancy password manager, which you should all do, it was like a little kind of mnemonic device that basically said like, I am grateful for. And so every single time I typed in my password, it was a little cue for me to stop and say, what am I grateful for? It was a pretty handy, I thought that up myself, I thought it was pretty clever. A Post-it note would work too. Okay, and to do that interpersonally. Okay, so in your meetings, in your interactions with colleagues, mentioning what you're grateful for is another way to mark progress and to increase meaning. So that's another really good interpersonal hack. Trust. Trust everybody you work with? If not, the first step you can take is to show trust to other people. You can't demand it, but you can build it by demonstrating it and by talking about the importance of it. So especially in the work-life arena, one of the most powerful things, Ellen just stepped out for a minute, but her research has really shown that leaders who role model good work, who are work-life role models, have a huge impact on the quality of work life in those organizations. Okay, I'm going to move forward. We saw that already. Last dial on your energy meter is the sense of purpose. How meaningful is what you are doing every day? To what extent do you feel like you're living out the values that are really important to you, that those are actually in practice, in your work, in your relationships, in the way that you spend your day? This is a great area to work on aligning. So here this is in the little green thing. This is things like my job enables me to do what I do best and enjoy most. If your score on that is kind of low, maybe a little bit of job crafting would help to bring into focus, lean more towards those things that you find really fulfilling, that are boosting your learning. Doing that too with your work relationships. And again, if you lead people, helping your whole team to do this. So being one of those leaders who is very developmental and is, providing opportunities for people to do a lot of learning on the job. Okay, what else here? So key things here are your strengths, what it is that you really excel at. Are you aware of, how it is that you really contribute to your organization? Those that reflect your strengths. What are the things that you're really interested in? What captures your attention and makes you feel excited about a project? What are the things that you want to learn? And how are you bringing that learning activity into your ongoing life? You know, how are you structuring your own learning? Part of it you can do by this process of experimentation and reflection. And what are the values that are most important to you? How can you make sure that the way that you behave really reflects those? Because when it doesn't, when it's out of alignment there, that can be a real source of stress, I can tell you from experience. So that's the energy dashboard. Again, you can map your scores onto the little dials on the back side of the sheet so that you can get an just overview snapshot of where are you. For those of you who are up in the green zones, up in the high yellow, fantastic, good work. Tell people that you know what's working. For those of you who are in the orange, maybe even in the red, really take these questions, okay, and think about what's a little step that you could take, or a couple things. What's something you'd like to shift, and what could you do to shift it? And you will find that this will have an impact on the degree to which you are thriving. I will, just go back. If anybody wants to follow up with me on any of this stuff, I am all over the internet, so be in touch. I don't know if we have time. Do we have time for any questions? It's like super late, but.
We've got time for one.
One question. Make it a good one. Yes.
Me?
You are the winner.
You're the winner.
I think that far and away the best talk in content and delivery we've heard today. One thing that I wasn't quite sure of, or that I'd asked about, is as you kind of tacitly assume that somebody is at the same level in the organisation. As one moves up an organisation, if one does that, then some things get much more difficult,
Yes.
and you have to let some things go, or delegate, that's the word people use. How do you recommend people should handle that? Because that's where managers frequently screw up.
Yep, absolutely. And I'll tell you, I recently did a workshop for an agency of the United Nations specifically on this question. And we used this tool and kind of a more extensive version of it. And it turns out that one of the major problems in this particular organization is that there is a real reluctance of the very top leadership to actually set priorities, to say, this is where we're going to focus our limited resources. We're not going to go here. Because it's this kind of thing like we want to be visible everywhere. And so I think, I am really hoping to have the opportunity to go back and work with these leaders to help to clarify this. But part of the thing about delegating, for example, is are you actually really developing and empowering the people beneath you? Are you using this principle of helping people to make progress and meaningful work such that everybody is really working with the highest level of energy that they can? Have you developed those kind of coaching skills to be able to to facilitate people's ability to problem solve and implement solutions, or are you carrying too much of that yourself? So there are certain things that managers can do, leaders, high-level leaders can do to learn how to be a greater source of energy for others and to be able to renew themselves and not run themselves down. But a lot of times there are strategic decisions about really what is our strategic focus going to be. How are we going to make sure we're holding to that? How do we make sure that we're actually aligning everybody in the company such that each person's activity contributes in some meaningful way to that, and that we can transmit the results thereof down the organization? So your question is a very important one and a pretty large one that could serve as the basis for a huge talk in and of itself. But again, I would go back to the kind of put your oxygen mask on, realize that you really need, top level leaders, it is vitally important that they manage their energy appropriately, because how well they do that ripples down and has massive impacts on the functioning of the organization overall. So I think actually the higher you are in an organization, the greater your degree of responsibility, the more important these things are. So, da-da-da-da, and that's
what a
it.
fountain of knowledge. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks.